Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Good morning, sir.
Okay, so today we'll just do a quick recap of what we did discuss yesterday. So we did talk about how to determine the spectral terms for different cases. So let's say if we have an atom with one optical electron, then how would we find it out? So that we have discussed, and then we did talk about let's say if we have atoms with more than one electron, that means let's say if it has two electrons or more than two, it could be also. So in that case, how is it possible to determine the spectral terms relevant for such system? So we did take an example of 4p system, and for that we have seen that what we are assuming here is that the atoms are weak. Sorry, the atomic number is relatively small here, which means that the spin orbit interaction is weak here. So what we have to do here is that we have to first couple individual spins. So that is spin correlation effect, and then you have to couple individual orbital angular momentum vector, which is the residual electrostatic interaction effect, and from there we get what sort of terms we can expect. And finally, so let's say for this case, if we have 4p and 4d, then we have s1 equal to half, l1 equal to 1, s2 equal to half, l2 equal to 2. So from there we get the multiplicity from s, that will be 1 and 3, and from l we see only p, d and f terms will be present here. And if we do put basically symbols here, then we'll get these terms like 1p, 1d, 1f, etc. Next, if we consider the spin orbit interaction, then jj cup basically you have to in that case we have to consider the j vector, and we have to couple s and l, and from there we will get further splitting in this, and then we will get a large number of terms. So in this case I think we did discuss that we will get, I think, total 12 terms as a result of the spin orbit coupling. And from there we can draw this sort of a energy level diagram, or diagram representing different states. And what we see there, that from the unperturbed level, that is the 4p4d system, whenever we have any kind of perturbation that is in kind of effective in the system, let's say whether it is spin correlation or residual electrostatic interaction or spin orbit coupling, these energy levels, it gets splitted, so multiple fine structure levels are being generated, and a subtotal of 60 levels can be created here. Then I asked you to do some examples at home. Next, we did discuss about systems with three or more optical electrons. So in that case, you actually can do it. Today, we'll start with selection rules. Okay. So as I mentioned in the last class, that selection rules, it tells us the allowed and forbidden transitions in any kind of energy spectrum. So if there are, let's say, a large number of energy levels or fine structures arising as a result of spin orbit interaction or any other kind of perturbation, so there is a possibility that an electron can jump from any level to any other level, let's say from level A to a level B. However, not all such transitions are allowed. So certain selection rules have to be followed, because in experiment we usually see some certain spectral lines which are, let's say, having certain wave number or wavelength, uh, with, let's say, certain energy which is associated with the spectral line. That means that certain rules have been followed whenever that transition has happened. So here we will see that thing. So for let's say if there is one electron which jumps at a time, in that case we are only interested in only the orbital angular momentum change of that individual electron. So the delta L has to be plus minus 1. However, if more than one electron jumps, then the sum of this delta L has to be odd in number. Now, let's say if we take the example of where am I? Right. Yeah. So let's say if I take the example of two electrons. So let's say for the first electron, if delta L1 is the change in L, it has to be plus minus 1, while for delta L2, it has to be 0 or plus minus 2. So if we take this example that if the transition is happening between 3D, 4D to 4S and 4P, then that is an allowed transition, because in this case, let's say if we look at the first state, let's say 3D to 4, let's say S, or let's say 4D to 4P. Okay, so here are actually total possibilities which are explained. So let's say if the transition is happening from 4D to 4P, then the change in delta L will be equal to minus 1. And for the transition between 3D and 4S, so here L is basically 3, and sorry, L is 2 for D, and for S it will be 0. So delta L2 here will be equal to minus 2. Or another possibility which can arise here is this one. So let's say this is situation A and this is situation B. So in situation B, we have, let's say, from 3D to 4P, there is a transition, which means that the delta L will jump from 2 to 1. So delta L will be, L1 will be 1 here. And another possibility is 4D to 4S. So here delta L2 will be 2 basically. Okay, so as we mentioned in the last slide, that for such case the total sum of this delta L has to be odd in number. And here we see that delta L1 plus delta L2, this sum is odd, and here also delta L1 plus delta L2, that sum is odd. Okay, so these kind of transitions are allowed. Okay, so other parts of this selection rule, it says that there is no restriction on the total quantum number n of either electrons, which means that principal quantum number can be anything. However, if we are talking about an electron as a whole, that means we are not talking about individual electrons, however, the atom itself. So in that case, L, S, and J, they have to satisfy the following conditions. So large L, that is the total orbital angular momentum. So delta capital L will have to be either 0 or plus minus 1. Okay. So, however, for if the atom has only one electron, then delta L equal to 0 will is not allowed. And delta S, that is the change in total spin angular momentum, that has to be 0. And delta J, that is the total angular momentum, that has to be either 0 or plus minus 1. However, here J equal to 0 to J equal to 0 is not allowed, although in that case we will get delta J equal to 0. Okay, so that particular transition is forbidden, but other than that, all in any other transition where delta J is 0 is allowed. So these are the following selection rules. Okay, so any question on this? Okay, so now there are few more points which are relevant in this context. So it says that the selection rules are only valid for weak spin orbit interaction, which means that let's say coupling between L and S is not much strong. That means we are talking about atoms with low Z. Okay, or something like, let's say, carbon, boron, silicon, nitrogen, phosphorus, things, atoms like that, which are basically little bit lighter atoms. Okay, however, spin orbit interaction, it increases with large Z. That means for heavy atoms. So if atoms are becoming heavier, that means Z is increasing, then we have to take into consideration the spin orbit interaction more and more. We will see that in the next part. Now, this particular model which we explained so far, it holds very well for lighter atoms. However, for heavy atoms, LS coupling, it breaks down, and JJ coupling is required, which is something we have also explained earlier. I mean, this is something you already know. Okay. So now we'll talk about JJ coupling. So you are probably familiar with this already. This is so what happens here is that the interaction between the orbital and spin angular momentum of individual electrons is much higher than the orbital interaction between the orbital angular momentum vector of different electrons or spin angular momentum vector. Okay. So I hope the statement is quite clear. So what it says is that, let's say I have electron 1, electron 2, electron 3, electron 4, and so on. Let's say n number of electrons I have. Okay. And this one have, let's say, L1 and S1. This one have L2, S2. This one have L3, S3, L4, S4. Okay, these are basically individual orbital angular momentum and spin angular momentum vectors for respective electrons. So if it is under LS coupling, that means that, let's say, the atom is lighter atom, then what happens is that individual L's will couple together. Okay, so basically sum over Li will give me the total L, and also similarly the S will be sum of all the individual SIs. That means S1 plus S2 and so on. Okay, and once I have that, then I will find the total angular momentum vector L plus S. Okay. Now, when JJ coupling will be applicable, it says that, let's say, for certain atoms, when the coupling between this individual orbital angular momentum vector, means its individual L vectors is not strong, or individual S vectors is not strong, in that case what will happen is that, let's say, the individual L1 and S1, they will couple together to form J1, and similarly L2 S2 will couple together to form J2, and so on. Okay, so that's how basically individual J vectors, they are coupling together to form a large J. So we will very soon see these things, and you have probably studied this thing earlier, that in a vector diagram also we can do this thing. So in the basically this case, let's say, what happens is that individual L's are kind of summing up. Okay, so let's say this is my L1, this is my L2, this is my L3. So they are summing up to become a large L, and similarly I can also have like a small s1, small s2, and small s3, that will give me a large capital S. Okay, and these L and S, they will couple together to form a large J under certain conditions. However, in the case of JJ coupling, what happens is that individual L and individual S. So let's say this is my L1 and this is my S1. So they will couple together to form J1. Similarly, for L2 and S2, they will couple together to form J2. Okay, and these individual tiny J vectors, they will add up to form large J. So I hope that part is this part is clear to everyone. Okay. Now we'll see basically how this thing is happening. So as I just explained, that if we take the example of a 2-electron atom, then we can see that, let's say, if we have electron 1 and electron 2, and we are labeling the individual angular momentum vectors by L1 S1 and L2 S2, then under LS coupling, what happens is that L1 and L2 couple together to form a large L, S1 S2 will couple together to form S, and the total J vector will be a sum of L plus S. However, under JJ coupling, individual L vectors, L and S1, which means that for electron 1, whatever the angular momentum vectors, they will couple to form J1, and then L2 and S2 will couple to form J2, and here J1 and J2 will couple together, or let's say they will add up to form this large J value. Okay, so this is the fundamental difference which we can observe mathematically. However, there is a lot of mathematics which is involved. Why this situation is arising here? Okay, so is there any question so far? Okay, so let us now have a look at the details of JJ coupling. So here the perturbations will follow this particular order. So first we have to take into account the spin orbit interaction. That means the coupling between individual, not individual, basically uh, L and S. Okay, so the coupling between L and S has to be taken into account. Next, in terms of magnitude or let's say effect, the interaction which will play a role will be residual electrostatic interaction, which means that individual L will interact with each other through this interaction. And last one or third one will be spin correlation interaction, which means that individual spin angular momentum vector S1, S2, they will couple together. So this is the order of magnitude which follows. So the most strongest one or the dominant one is spin orbit interaction. Okay. So since I have discussed it in quite details, so I hope this concept is clear. So in usually whenever you are going for some interview, this question comes that what is spin orbit interaction, then you should be able to answer this. Okay. So let us see how does the coupling work. So here individual L and S, they will couple. These are small s and small l. They couple to form a j, which will have a magnitude of square root of j times j plus 1 times h bar. And remember, j is the quantum number here. Okay. So if let's say we are talking about one particular electron, then we know that it will be spin half, which means that s equal to half, and the j value which will be allowed in this case will be L minus half and L plus half. Okay, so in this case, the let's say if I want to find the value of j, since it is one electron, so all I have to do is that I have to take the square root of j times j plus 1 times h bar. However, if I have more than one electron, then I will have individual j vectors, that is j1, j2 and everything. So I have to take the contributions of everyone. So in that case, let's say if I have j1, j2, j3 and so on up to jn. So in this case, if I want to know what will be the values of j, or let's say large j or total j that is possible for such a system, then we have to estimate the quantum numbers or let's say the values of j which will be possible. And how will we find out? So we have to take the values of individual j vectors, and the minimum value of j will be this one, which is the minimum of all the vector sum of all this j, and the maximum will be the maximum of the sum of all this j. And between the minimum and maximum, it will increase by 1 until it reaches the maximum. Okay, I hope this is clear. We will take some example and then maybe this will be made more clear there. So let us take the example of 4P and 4D system under JJ coupling. So here one exercise is given that you can try this system also, or let's say this electron system. So this is your homework. So you can try this particular 4D system and using LS coupling, and you can try to find out what will be the terms that are possible under LS coupling for such a system. Okay, so here we'll look at what will be the possible terms under JJ coupling. So let's say we will start with individual electrons. So we have a 4p electron. Okay, so we have a 4p electron. So we know the L1. So let's say this is my electron 1, Okay, so here L1 is 1 and S1 is half. And let's say for electron 2, which is basically my 4d electron, here my L2 will be 2 and S2 will be half also. So that's what I'm getting here. L1 equal to 1, S1 equal to half, L2 equal to 2, S2 equal to half. Now what I have to do is that, let's say I'll try to find out J1. Okay, so I'll not put the vector sign here because I'm just taking the amplitude. So here J1 will be, let's say, the minimum of this, that means 1 and half, the minimum, until it reaches the maximum, that is 1 plus half. Okay, so the minimum will be 1 minus half, which is half, and the maximum will be 3 over 2. Okay, and same will be true for J2. So here the minimum will be 2 minus half, which is 3 by 2, maximum will be 2 plus half, which is 5 by 2. So that's what we are also seeing here. Okay, now what we will do is that we have got the possible values of J for individual electrons. And then we have to make the combinations between individual J values, and we will see what will be the total number of combinations that are possible in such case. So here we have, let's say, half and 3 by 2, and here we have 3 by 2 and 5 by 2. So we have total 4 terms including J1 and J2. That means we can have total 4 combinations here. So the combinations here you can see, so here it says that we have total 4 combinations. So what are the combinations? The combinations will be half and half. So remember, this half is representing J1, and this second here basically this first half is representing J1, and 3 by 2 is representing J2. So in each of these brackets, whenever whatever number you are seeing first, that representing the J1, and the second number is representing J2. So here the first bracketed term will be half and 3 by 2. Second bracketed term will be half 5 by 2. Then 3 by 2, 3 by 2, and 3 by 2, 5 by 2. Okay. Now what you have to do in the next step? So I said that in the first step, what I have to do is that I have to couple individual L and S to find out what will be the possible values of J in such a system. Okay. So that I have done. Now once the J's are combined, so I have to find out what will be the total value of J using J1 and J2. So here also I have to take into consideration a similar method for finding this out. That means J1 and J2 minimum to J1 and plus J2 maximum. So here let's say if I take this particular example, that is half and 3 by 2. So here the values of J will be half to minimum to half plus 3 by 2, because this is the maximum. So here minimum will be, so this is usually mod actually. Okay. So here minimum will be 3 by 2 minus half, which is 1. So 1 is the minimum, and maximum will be 3 by 2 plus half, which is 2. Okay, since we don't have any other combinations possible in between them, so the possible values of J here will be 1 and 2. So that's what we are seeing here. And if we take the combination half and 5 by 2, then the possible values of J will be 2 and 3. 3 by 2, 3 by 2, we will get 4 values. Okay, so let us look at this, why we are getting 4 values. So let's say we have, so here, let's say 3 by 2, to minimum 2, maximum will be 3 by 2 plus 3 by 2. So what will be the minimum? We just subtract this, so that will give us 0. And the maximum will be 3 by 2 plus 3 by 2, that means it is 3. Okay, so let me write it down at a slightly far distance from this. Okay, so now if I want to go from the minimum to maximum, what I have to do, I have to increase it by 1. So I'll have 1, then I have 2, and next will be 3. So I'll have total 4 values of J which are possible under such combination. Then if I take into account, if I consider the fourth combination, that is 3 by 2 and 5 by 2, then the possible values of J will be 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can again try a similar exercise and you will find these values. Okay. So now here the state with let's say highest value of J will have the highest energy, and the state with the lowest value of J, let's say here basically we have only 2J, so that will give us the lowest energy. So is there any question so far on this? How did this combination coupling anything? Okay, so now we'll see how do we get there. So this is what I have explained already, that how we are arriving at this. But keep in mind, whenever we get a final large value of J, that is associated with again a multiplicity of J plus 1. So these are basically values of Mj. So that will be J2 minus J, and it I sum over this, then it will give me 2J plus 1 values. So that is the total multiplicity, which means that each level which is specified by a particular value of J can further be splitted further. Can further be splitted into 2J plus 1 sub levels, and that will be specified by different Mj. Okay, so now if I draw the energy level diagram, so here you can see that I have the 4P 4D level here. So this is the unperturbed level, and under JJ coupling, so in the first step what I have is that I have this individual combinations, that is we have four combinations. So 3 by 2 5 by 2, then 3 by 2 3 by 2, half 5 by 2, half 3 by 2, and from there if I couple this individual J, so here this is my J1, here this is my J2. So if I couple them, then I will get this total value of J. So here for the first case we are getting J equal to 4321, then J equal to 3210, then again 32, and then 21. So this number of splittings are happening as a result of JJ coupling. Okay, so now if you want, you can further try to find out what will be the multiplicity of each of these levels. So here basically again further 2J plus 1 multiplicity will be there, which means that here it will be 2 times 4 plus 1, so it will be 9 sub levels will be associated with it. And similarly for this one you can have 2 times 3 plus 1, which will be 7, and so on. So you can add up and then you can see finally how many time structure levels are possible if we take into account all the perturbations that are existing in this system. So I hope this part is clear to everyone. Okay. So now we look at the selection rule. So here the selection rule says that the delta J has to be 0 or plus minus 1 for the jumping electron, which means that whichever electron is having a transition from one level to another, delta J has to be 0 or plus minus 1. However, if we are considering an atom as a whole, then the total value of J have to be either, let's say the change in total J have to be either 0 or plus minus 1, keeping in mind that J equal to 0 to J equal to 0 is not allowed. Okay. And we are not considering delta S or delta L here, because these are L and S are not good quantum numbers, because JJ coupling is into picture. That means that individual L and S, they have already coupled to form a J vector, and those individual J vectors couple to form a large J. So that is why L and S are not very much relevant, or let's say good quantum numbers here. And other than that, you can also remember that in terms of the strength of interaction, I explained that spin orbit interaction will be the highest one, then residual electrostatic interaction and spin spin correlation will follow. Okay, so if the spin orbit interaction is already present, that means it will be the strongest one. That means we don't need to take into account the interaction between individual L and S. Such case. Okay, so this mostly finishes our part of LS coupling and JJ coupling. So, is there any question? Okay, so if not, then please go through it and then let me know in the next class that if you have any question. So the next section which I'm going to talk about is the spectra of alkali atoms. So after this we will talk about, so the spectra, why alkali atoms are interesting, because alkali atoms gives us quite interesting spectra, and there are certain effects which are observed in the spectra of alkali atoms, which are like kind of, it forms the basis of atomic physics. So, for example, you have studied about Zeeman effect, then Passenbach effect, then Stark effect. So, all these effects, they are commonly observed in the spectra of alkali atoms. So, here we will first start with alkali atoms, and then we will get into the parts where we will talk about Zeeman effect and Stark effect, things like that. Okay, so now before getting into this topic, so here I am not going to talk about. So of course, in the first part, I'll talk mostly the qualitative discussions of what is the spectra of alkali atoms, how does it look like, and after that, I'll talk about the Zeeman spectra and basically the Stark effect and all these things. So as you know that these are all quantum mechanical perturbations which is involved behind these effects. So there will be quite a lot of calculations, and I will not probably be covering all the calculations because of lack of time. And also in the syllabus, it just says that qualitative discussion. However, if you are interested, you are anytime welcome to read these things. So you can read the book of Branston and Joachim, or even you can read the book of Griffiths also. So I'll try to cover as much as possible, but it is like an ocean. Okay, so if you, I mean, I will probably not be able to cover everything there. So, in if you are interested, then you can also probably go and look at it. So, in future, if somebody is planning to do research in atomic physics, then I think it will be a good idea to have an in-depth knowledge on this topic. Okay, so having said that, let us now look at the spectra of alkali atoms. So, what are the alkali atoms? There are these following atoms which are called as alkali atoms, that are lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, and this FR, I forgot the name actually. Yeah. So commonly we do mostly talk about lithium, sodium, potassium, and rubidium. Okay. So now, as you know, that these alkali atoms are usually light, and they are, let's say, if you are putting them into a closed container, they will act as a diluted gas, which means that the interaction between individual atoms will not be very much strong. Now, experimentally, what is observed is that they have some kind of emission spectra, which means that emission and absorption, you know already, that if we have energy levels, and if it is a jump from the higher energy level to the lower energy level, then the spectra will be called as emission spectra. And the emission spectra is commonly observed for these alkali atoms, and the spectral lines which are originating as a result of the spectra, they have four series, or let's say four primary lines which are present there. So these four lines can be termed into four series. So the first one is called as principal series, which is bright and most persistent. That means this is the prominent one which you will see. Then there is sharp series, where you will see finer lines. Then the third one is diffuse. So it is comparatively broader lines and fundamental series. So this comes up in the infrared region. So total principal, sharp, diffuse, fundamental. Okay, so 4 series are observed. And you can use Balmer's formula to calculate the wave number of any of these particular series. So the formula, it actually says that nu, what is the wave number of any particular emission spectrum, will be equal to nu infinity minus r divided by n square. So r is the Rydberg constant and n is the quantum number basically. Anyway, now let's say for principal spectra, we will denote it by nu m and p. So p is the superscript which is used to denote principal series. Okay. So here that will be equal to nu infinity p minus r by m plus p square, where m can be any number starting from 2, 3, 4 up to infinity. And for the sharp series, this will be basically m. So nu ms will be equal to nu infinity s minus r divided by m plus s whole square. M will be equal to 2, 3, 4 up to infinity. And similarly for diffuse series and fundamental series, you can also find out the corresponding wave numbers. Okay, so sometimes in exam you get some questions in these things, so that is why I have actually given these things here. But the information that you need to remember is that there are 4 series which are usually or commonly observed in the spectra. Okay, okay, and now next basically, so here is one question for you. So the question says that, let's say if we are doing the measurements on the line spectrum of an atom, and it shows that separation between adjacent energy levels of increasing energy in a multiplate are in the ratio 3:5. Use Landé's interval rule to assign quantum numbers S, L, and J to these levels. Okay. So this is an exercise for you. You please try it at home. So what it says is that some transition is happening, and the multiplet, the separation between adjacent energy levels is in the ratio 3:5. So you have to find out the values of S, L, and J. Okay, so this is your homework. You try it at home. Okay, so with this I'll finish today's class. Is there any question? Okay, not. So now about tomorrow's class, um, do you want me to start a new topic? So I'll probably be talking about Zeeman effect, or you want me to recap, or do you want a doubt clearing session, anything similar to that?
Sir, recap or doubt clearing?
So you don't want to study more?
Sir, mid semester is next week. That's why
I know mid semester is close, okay, but we have a big syllabus also. Okay, so then tomorrow we'll do a doubt clearing. So you please read the things and then come up with your questions. So we'll do a doubt clearing session. Okay.
Okay.
By the way, did you get the timetable? Exam timetable?
No, sir.
So you have got some timetable for your class, right? Uh, like some central timetable was circulated. So there, I think some exam dates are also mentioned, because
Yes, sir.
this is automated already. So do you remember that what was the date for exam of this course? Like which day of the week?
So probably 22nd, the first paper.
22nd, right? That means 20th is Monday, I think. Sorry, 20th is Monday, right? 20th is Monday, I think. Okay. Okay, anyway, I think because I think this year it is automated, so you will have all the exams between Monday to, I think, Friday or maximum Saturday. I think even less than that. Yeah, so you will not have to worry about this. Okay, so we'll then meet tomorrow, and yeah, we'll discuss further. Okay, so I'll finish it here.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
okay, thank you.